Hi, I'm Dan, this is at Midlife Crisis Motorcyclist, and this is the VMoto Stash, a new 125cc style electric bike from the Chinese manufacturer of electric scooters and things like that. This is also another attempt on my part to see if there really is life beyond combustion engine motorbikes, having had a couple of rides previously on electric bikes with varying levels of success, shall we say. There was the amazing RM1S, which seemed very much in its comfort zone, riding around the streets of London, and then the Zero DSRX, which you might have seen me ride previously, which was, well, it wasn't quite the happy experience I was hoping for. I think, although it was a cool bike, it was kind of hampered by its kind of aim to just be an electrified version of conventional big adventure bikes, whereas bikes like the Stash, the Maving and the Zero FXE, which I've also ridden, seem to fit much more comfortably with that kind of sort of urban dwelling, young rider, CBT, L-plates kind of thing, which seems to me to fit the whole electric bike thing rather better. It's also interesting because electric bikes in this category are actually more powerful and faster than the combustion engine equivalents you might otherwise be riding on that kind of license. Now, pricing for the Stash starts at £6,299 plus on-the-road charges, which immediately looks like a bit of a hurdle, doesn't it? Especially when you compare it against bikes like the Honda CB125R, which is what I started out on when I was just through my CBT and on L-plates, and for the fact that costs about £2,000 less, which is pretty sobering, but we'll come back to that in due course and look at perhaps what the bike is about. Now, in terms of the way it looks, it's a very different proposition from the sort of overtly retro appearance of the Maving. It's designed by the same bloke who used to style MV Agustas, so that's pretty cool. And it's got this kind of pseudo sports bike stance with some neat features like this kind of trim piece here, which kind of resembles an electric motor. It's got some pretty cool features as well. It's got this compartment here where you can, stash, a helmet, lock, charger, things like that. And it's got some big bike features as well, like cruise control, keyless start, and a fully functional TFT display. In terms of technical aspects of the bike, it's got a big 17.2 kilowatt hour battery here in the frame, which you can't remove. We'll come back to that. And it uses an electric motor here, driving the rear wheel via a chain like a normal motorbike. That's different from the hub motor on the Maving, and a bit more, as I say, proper motorbike style, isn't it? It puts out just over 12 horsepower continuous, which is a little bit shy of the A1 licence limit, but in a quirk of the way that electric motors are legislated, they can actually deliver more peak power for temporary periods, and via a boost button on the handlebar there, you can get 22 horsepower as and when you need it. There's also the fact that electric motors have a lot more torque than combustion engine ones, and although I haven't been able to find an exact figure for the Stash yet, I think it's in around the kind of 140 newton meters range, which would sound about right because the Zero FXE, that was I think over 100 newton meters, and the Maving had as much as 250 newton meters. Whatever it's got, it's going to be a lot more than an equivalent petrol 125, so that CB125R, that only has 11 newton meters. So that kind of puts into context some of the differences in performance of a bike like this. Now, speaking of performance, it will apparently top out at 75 miles an hour, and the maximum range is 112 miles, although not at 75 miles an hour. You'd have to be doing less than 30 miles an hour to score that. VMoto says it will, in kind of all-round usage, do more like 90 odd miles, hopefully, which brings us to my commute, which is a 75-mile round trip over the hills to Manchester that way, taking in a pretty wide variety of road types, some sweeping moorland roads, some city riding, a bit of all sorts like that. Begging the question, can the Stash do that 75-mile round journey on a cold November day like this? Well, there's only one way to find out, isn't there? Righto, let's see if this VMoto Stash is capable of what it says it can do, and will take me on my 75-mile round-trip commute to Manchester and back, hopefully. Now we're starting out here with a bit of kind of town riding, which sort of suits the Stash's abilities and should help the efficiency a bit, although as you can see where I live is pretty hilly, so that will put a bit of strain on the battery. We're showing 95% now, and we've done just over a couple of miles, so we'll have to see how that translates. Now, in terms of what the bike's like to ride, although it kind of presents as a sort of proper motorbike in the way that it looks, you know, that sort of mini sports bike appearance, once you sit on it you realise it's perhaps a bit more scooter-like, in keeping with VMoto's background. And I mean that in terms of the kind of riding position. It's quite upright, the pegs are quite low. The fact that all the controls are twist throttle as usual, obviously, but then you've got linked brakes, so like bicycle style brakes, so right for front, left for rear, but they are linked. You've got ABS, but it means there's nothing for your feet to do. No clutch, no rear brake or anything like that, so that's taken me a bit of adjustment. Every time I come up to a junction I'm kind of going for my brake and gears, but obviously nothing like that to worry about. The bike itself weighs 155 kilos, which actually isn't bad, because you have in your head that electric bikes, like electric cars, weigh a lot more than their combustion engine equivalents, but no, that's about the same as a combustion 125. It feels very small and kind of flickable, so I think, you know, once we get into the kind of filtering and town traffic in Manchester, it'll be right in this element. But before you get there, we've got some proper roads to do as well, so it'd be interesting to see how it copes with that kind of riding as well. And that's the beauty of this commute, that it does throw in a real mix of riding, so it'll be a good test of whether the bike has got the range. Because one of the complications of the Stash is, because the battery is built into the bike, unlike the Maven, you have to charge the bike in situ, which, as I found out with the Zero, is a problem, because you can only charge it off a 3-pin, which is fine if you've got a garage or something like that at home, or somewhere at work where you can charge. But if you're out in public, all the kind of public charging options now are for electric cars, and they use a Type 2 charger, which this bike doesn't have. So you're going to have to find somebody with a 3-pin socket to charge it, or, as I say with the Maven, you can take the battery out, carry it with you and charge it at your desk. So that's going to be a big question, and particularly on a day like this, you know, the temperature is 5 degrees. That's not going to favour an electric bike, and as we reach a national speed limit road, I'm going to be very interested to see how it'll cope. So I'll get going, and I will pick up when we're on the proper road and see how we're doing. Right, so welcome to what's usually my favourite bit of the commute, which is to say the kind of open moorland bit. The bit I usually enjoy the most of all, but with a view to maintaining range and having to take it a little bit easier than I would. You know, certainly when I was on the CB125, I'd be kind of flat out across here maxing it out, but currently we're on 65% of charge having covered 14 miles, so about halfway into the commute. Slightly worryingly, my range is saying 27 miles, which isn't very much. But I'm hoping that'll kind of even out as we kind of hit more of the kind of the urban roads, and I can use a bit more of the regen. Certainly when I rode the Zero FXE, which is the kind of supermoto style electric bike, and it's got a similar sized battery to this, and I did the commute on that. And when you're in the town riding, the regen is definitely a big bonus. But what's it like out here on a proper road? Well, it feels actually pretty good. It's nice and chuckable. It feels really light and kind of chuckable. I just ground the peg out there, as you probably heard. That apparently is a bit of an issue with these bikes. I've heard that from a few people who've reviewed it already, so I have to keep an eye on that. But yeah, feels pretty good. The suspension's not bad. The kit looks pretty budget, but it's working alright, and the silence is actually quite compelling. It's a bit weird, as I say, not kind of having gears to go through as you approach a corner like that, but instead, if you're a bit tactical, so you use regen rather than use the brakes, can actually, hey, there's the pegs again. Yeah, sorry about that. If you use the regen rather than the brakes, you're actually putting power back into the battery, so hopefully that'll stand me in a good stead later on. Now, I've got 3 riding modes here. I'm running it in eco at the moment. That seems to limit it to about 40 miles an hour, so I'll just put it into normal now. There's a bit more grunt there, and then we've got sport. Oh yeah, there's quite a big difference in sport there, and I imagine that's what I'll probably be wanting to use if I tried to get up to that 75 mile an hour maximum, but I don't think I'm going to be doing that, given really I'm looking to save as much battery as I can. So again, just rolling off the throttle, getting little regen light coming on there. That's putting power back into the battery. So it's a little bit frustrating, given that the bike is fun to ride, but on a road like that you're having to just kind of sit there at 40 miles an hour, whatever, to save some battery. But we'll see how we do on the way home. Maybe a little bit more juice in it, and we can let it off the leash, maybe try and get close to that 75 mile an hour top speed, but we shall see. Anyway, so there's the kind of the wiggly bit of the commute. Let's crack on and see how it does in the city traffic. Right, so we've made it into lovely central Manchester. 29 miles covered and 47% battery showing, so not exactly where I'd like to be really. I'd like to have a little bit more juice in the battery, but it is what it is. And at least now we're very much more in the Stash's comfort zone of kind of riding in city traffic, which is where an electric bike really makes a lot more sense, and also the bike is a lot more efficient. So if you listen to VMoto's claims, in these kind of conditions the Stash should be capable of 112 miles apparently. And certainly you learn to ride a bit more tactically, so a situation like that where I've got a red light coming up, I can just roll off the throttle and use the regenerative braking. And I noticed on the Zero that I did actually score quite a few more miles. So, and it's good for your forward planning as well, because you're looking ahead, which is obviously good good practice when you're riding anyway. One thing I've noticed as well is that the motor on this bike is a little noisier than the Maving and the Zero. Maving obviously has a hub motor, the Zero has a belt drive. This has a mechanical chain drive, so there's a bit more whine about it. I'm also noticing a little bit of sort of shunt on and off the throttle, so in that kind of, when you're in the cusp of being between power on and regen, you'll notice that it's a little bit kind of almost like there needs to be a little bit more fine tuning, I think, in the kind of in the regenerative braking setup. But it's not bad, and the regen is quite strong, so when you come off the throttle and you get that little yellow light there to tell you that it's regenerating, you can definitely feel it, and you can pretty much come to a halt like this. So I'm not using the brakes at all. Just check nobody's going to run into the back of me. So it doesn't quite come to a complete standstill on regen, but near enough, so you can effectively ride around town without using the brakes at all. So that's obviously going to help the efficiency a little bit. So there we go, I've made it here, 30 miles, a little over half a battery used. Will it get me home? Well, I guess that's what we're going to find out in a bit, isn't it? Okay, so time to head for home on the Stash, and I'm going to try and set aside the fact that the range has just dropped to 45%. That's with 31 miles covered so far, and about the same to go to home. So it's going to be marginal. You would hope, say 90 miles is the range you're supposed to get in kind of all-round use, but it is a cold day, that doesn't favour batteries, so we'll have to see how it plays out. Fingers crossed. And in the meantime, enjoy what this bike is good at, which is to say, bombing around city centres like this, because it really is loads of fun. You know, it pulls away from the lights really quickly, no hesitation, no clutch to worry about, just twist and go. Acceleration is good. You're away and over the other side of the lights usually before anyone else has even moved. The bike's nice and small for cutting through the traffic. The seat is low, so you don't feel intimidated. And like I've said before about these bikes, I think the fact that they feel more like e-bikes in a way, because, you know, you've got familiar brake levers, you don't have to worry about foot controls for brakes or gears or anything like that. So for somebody coming from a non-motorcycling background, somebody who's new to powered two-wheelers, it's a really easy thing to ride. And, you know, if you've got a generation of people who've grown up riding e-scooters and line bikes and things like that, then I can see how this would be a really logical next step, and that's going to be a good thing, hasn't it? Because we all know that the motorcycle industry desperately needs to attract younger riders, and this is the kind of product that could do it, I think. And also there's the fact that this feels much more like a motorbike than the Maving, although they're quite similar in kind of size, performance, and kind of the usage case. The Maving does look and feel a bit more bicycle-like. It's cool with its kind of retro styling, but it's It's a different vibe. And I think the Stash is, well, it's a different audience, isn't it? It's got the screen, it's got the connectivity. Apparently it's a third-party app that you have to pay for, but it's got those kind of things as well. And it looks just like more modern and kind of urban, if that's even a thing. Well, I guess this is urban, isn't it? I'm literally riding in a city. So yeah, I think in this environment it works brilliantly, and I'm really enjoying riding it. Even in this eco mode that I'm sticking in for trying to save as much battery as possible, it's still, hopefully when these lights eventually go green, I'll be able to demonstrate that it's got decent squirt off the line. Come on, lights. Anytime. There we go. And there we go. Getting off the line on the Stash is as easy and painless and quiet as that. And then you use the regen up to the next set of lights, and hopefully haven't used any battery at all. Anyway, a few miles to go yet. So a bit more of this urban riding, hopefully put some energy back into the battery to get me over that big hill. Right, so here we are on the ride home, and it is a glorious day up on the tops, so I'm enjoying the views. How are we doing on kind of range and things like that? Well, 47 miles in, so it's 13 miles to go, and slightly disturbingly I'm showing 18% of charge, and my range showing is about 10 miles, but I'm not really paying much heed to that. Now, what's frustrating is that really good in the city, works really well there, and I'd like to think it's got the performance to actually make a road like this quite good fun as well, apart from the pegs. But for this particular journey, where I'm trying to kind of eke out what little power I have, I'm basically having to ride at about half the speed I could otherwise enjoy the bike. So I might as well be on a 50cc moped or the electric equivalent, because really I'm a little bit nervous of going much faster than you say. What am I doing now? Nearly 40 miles an hour. Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous about going much faster than that, on the basis that I might not make it home. But one advantage of this route that I do is that although it's got a big up, it's also got a big down, so I'm slightly counting on that last 2 miles to home, the downhill. Hopefully I'll be able to regen enough power to get me to the door, but we'll have to see. At least riding at this speed I can, enjoy the view. So, every silver lining and all that. Okay, so I'm maybe a mile and a bit from home. I've got 8% of charge left, 5 miles of range still showing. Should just about make it, although I will say this is absolute full throttle up this hill, and I'm doing 16 miles an hour, so I'm thinking that the low state of charge, it's gone into some sort of limp mode. I think I've literally cycled up this hill faster than this. Look, I'm being overtaken by cars. This is a little bit humiliating, but you know what? I'm still moving. And that's the main thing. We are still rolling. And I think we've got maybe a mile to run. I think might just make it. It's going to be tight, but we might just make it. So there we go, I made it in the end. Only just, it was a bit marginal, but we did it. 5% battery or so left, I think about 4 or 5 miles, and although it's a bit of a painful crawl up that last hill in the kind of self-preservation mode that it had defaulted to, I did make it, and that's the main thing. And I think fair play to the Stash, that was a pretty stern test of its abilities given the nature of the roads, you know, the big hill, the fast roads, the ambient temperatures, things like that. So yeah, I don't begrudge the fact that, you know, I had to take it easy and do some kind of battery conservation. I don't think that's the kind of commute this bike is built for. So yes, I think if I still was doing that ride on a CBT, I would be sticking with a combustion bike like the Honda CB125 that I was riding previously. How does it fare as an electric bike compared with some of the other ones that I've ridden so far? Well, I'm maybe a little bit more generous to this bike than I was the Zero, the big Zero, because, you know, it would be easy to be rude about it, but as I say, it was testing it to the limit really, whereas the Zero, I was less impressed because I was trying to use it like, well, in the way that it was intended as a normal motorbike, and it didn't quite hold up in that respect. The other Zero that I rode, the FXE, which is like the sort of supermoto one, comparable battery and power to this, that I also did the commute on that, and it just about made it. So that was an impressive bike as well, much more expensive, nearly twice the price of this, and a little bit more sophisticated in its regen and things like that. It worked a little bit better, but I think, you know, fair play to the Stash. It's built to a price. It's not the highest quality motorbike, and I think for, you know, £6 or so you might find a few things that didn't impress you quite so much, but as a bike to ride, it was really impressive, and it was certainly good fun in its kind of urban comfort zone around the city. Definitely worked very well in that respect, and I think if I was doing an urban commute, an electric bike would make a bit more sense, although there is obviously that price hurdle again, that is going to be a factor. But it depends what you want really. You know, if you're on a CBT and you just want to get around, something like this is really good. If you're looking to work up to riding a big motorbike, maybe not so much. In terms of how this compares with the Maving, I like riding the Maving a lot, very different style. I think the removable batteries on the Maving might be a really useful feature if you're doing an urban commute, just for the flexibility of being able to take them out and charge them wherever you happen to be. The fact that this bike and the Zero FXE as well, you need to charge off a 3-pin. It's great when you're at home, if you've got a garage, that kind of thing, but you know, if you street park or you don't have anywhere to charge at work, that kind of thing, the Maving's removable batteries and those on other bikes like it are really, really useful. So think about that if you're looking at an electric bike. But yeah, it's been an interesting experience. I've enjoyed riding it, and I hope that was an interesting and enlightening video for you. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit like, subscribe if you haven't already, and join me in the comments. I'm sure there'll be plenty to talk about with this. And for the time being, I'll say goodbye, thanks for watching, and ride safe.